Here we are at the memorial for Sherman Smoot here in Paso Robles. Flew in this morning, braved the weather, got on the ground. It's a full house here today. Let's see what's going on. Inside the hangar for the ceremony. We'll get up close and personal here in a minute. We're at the museum here in Paso Robles. He was a big benefactor of this place, check airman for it, of course. And more going on outside. Sherman's T-28 and a heck of a turnout here at the museum.
Yeah. Damn, I wish I had my damn camera.
So many stories to be told. Remember race 86 when he first got here with John Moore's airplane? Cub Scout uniform. Goodness. Yep, the Dreadnought shirt. I got one or two of those. An honor to have it, for sure. In the DC-3, he was check airman for the DC-3 here at the museum. What else we got? The DC-3 and a Argonaut trophy. Second in the gold 2021. Sherman is T-28, which is out front. One of those trophies, that's a long time ago. 2007 Checkmate. Sixth in the gold, third in the gold. Yeah, stuff everywhere. Bad Company. Is that the gold? That's the champion. AT6 champion. In Bad Company. 1996. I remember the day. I was backup pilot for that day, actually. Because he was out racing Tigers, Yak, and Mayday to the far side of the airport. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get a crack at racing that thing, the top qualifier, but he showed back up in good spirits and got it done. Fourth place in the gold. I think we got a second place trophy on that one. From that year? Could that be? That could be. Third place in 06. Ah, yes, in the family. Oh, who is that? Grandkids, maybe? Cards and well wishes. Ah, there's the real picture. Oh, this is cool. Look at that. All the Reno badges. Phoenix 500, baby. I got one of those. Love it. Sherm is a wee young lad.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh man, that's cool. Racing life well lived there.
Old school.
D-Day Squadron badge, no doubt from when he went to Europe in the C-47. Good stuff. Race 86 back in my day.
I'd like to ask you, in case you've forgotten to silence your phones or anything that could possibly go off as we pay tribute, it's fitting that we are here. It's just perfect that we're here. Just to introduce myself, my name is Adam Montiel. I'm a local broadcaster, friend, admirer of Sherm. I had the pleasure interviewing Sherman many times. I have a wine show, so we talked wine, but as you know, Sherman was he was dynamic and he led in many different arenas. Today, here there are winery friends, there are veteran friends, there are pilot friends, there are racing friends. Sherman had great stories from all the walks of life he led. He would tell them on the air, but it was his smile, his sense of humor, his unique way that made these stories come alive, even on the radio. Sherman had a smile that you could hear. Born in San Luis Obispo, July 29, 1948, Sherman was raised here in North San Luis Obispo County. Initially, he lived on the Paso Robles Airport in the old base firehouse while his father pioneered an aerial pipeline patrol business here called Patrol Line. Sherman entered Navy Flight School in Pensacola, January of 1971. Received his wings, April of 72. After completing the F-4 Phantom Rag in San Diego, he joined VF-21 mid-cruise for the end of Linebacker 2 Ops, and was there when the Vietnam War ended, flying off the USS Ranger in the Gulf of Tonkin. Completing 2 cruises with VF-21 as their LSO, he was then assigned to the indoctrination team of the Navy's new Lockheed S-3 Viking. He trained and carrier qualified the RAG's first cadre of flight instructors, authored the formation and in-flight refueling training syllabus, and co-authored the carrier landing training syllabus. He left active duty in 1977 to pursue an airline career with Continental Airlines, which he said on the air, he explained as going to the dark side. He remained in the Naval Reserves flying F-4s for another 4 years. In 1983, Sherman took a leave from the airline to run Archie's business patrol line after Archie passed away suddenly. He was back where he started on the Paso Robles Airport. 89, Sherman sold patrol line to concentrate on raising his daughter and to fly in the South Pacific for Continental's Air Micronesia. He retired from Continental in 2005 after 28 years of service, 24 of those in international operations. He has type ratings in the DC-9, MD-80, B-727, 757, 67, DC-10, and Boeing 777. He got involved in warbirds when he was asked to fly a P-47 Jug, owned in part by Judge Bill Clark. He has also flown and raced various other warbirds. He was granted an unlimited letter of authority from the FAA, so he could have flown any single or multi-engine beast with more than 1,000 horsepower. He's been flying in the Reno Air Races for more than 20 years, won the AT-6 SNJ National Championship in 1996. Sherm had some 50 years of aviating under his belt. He was easily one of the best at what he did. I remember him telling me a story of flying the C-47 over Normandy on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. He mentioned he was looking forward to flying back first class and relaxing. Well, the insurance company found out and said the only way that plane is insured is if Sherm is on it. That's the kind of experience and respect that his flying commanded. When not flying, he started Bella Luna Estate Winery, which he founded in 1998 with his good buddy and fellow veteran Kevin Healy. Together they made world-class wine not far from here, and also paid homage to flight and to service with their wine. People know a fighter pilot red all over the world, not just for how good it tastes, but for the good work that they've been able to do with the wine for causes that support vets as well. To lose Sherman the way we did is, of course, tough. For the decades he flew in Reno, Lori told me that they had talks in the hotel room, the talks of what if. And even though Sherm always assured that nothing would happen because he had an angel on his wings, his dad. Even with Sherm's assurances, Lori always said before every race, she stood on the trailer with the crew, listening to everything Sherman had to say, because as she put it, because if those were his last words, I wanted to hear them. In talking to Lori and learning Sherman's dad left in a similar way again when Sherman was only 6, Lori said of that angel on Sherman's wing that perhaps his dad wanted him home. As Lori put it, maybe it was Dad saying, it's time for you to come up. I want to meet you. Now I'd like to introduce some folks who were very important to the man Sherm was, to share with you about him. I first have the distinct pleasure of introducing Carly Smoot, Sherm's daughter, to share about her father. Carly.
Let's see if I can get through this. My dad was far braver than I. Hi everyone. In case you don't know me, I'm Carly Smoot. I'm Sherman Smoot's daughter. My family and I want to first extend our heartfelt gratitude for all of you who have come from near and far to be here today to celebrate my dad. Seeing all of these incredible humans that have been a slice in the big old pizza pie that was my dad's life is moving for us as a family. So thank you for your time today, truly. If I'm being honest, I went back and forth about getting up and speaking for 2 reasons. One, I wasn't sure I could make it through this speech, and I'm still not sure, so bear with me. And 2, I wasn't sure I could find the right words to articulate and condense all the things my father was to me in a speech. However, if my dad raised me to be anything, he raised me to be brave, so I'm going to give it my best shot. I know many of you know my dad through his big, bright, beautiful military, aviation, and winery careers. But I'm hoping today to show you a side of my dad outside of the flight suits and wine-stained work boots. My dad was so many things to so many people. But to me, he was my favorite dance partner, my travel buddy, my soft landing on hard days, my #1 cheerleader, and my due north whenever I lost my way. What I know to be true is that grief is mighty, and that learning to do life without my dad is the hardest thing I've ever done. Grief is so much about the missing. I miss his hi, honey, every time he answered the phone. I miss his hugs. I miss the way we are the exact same sort of stubborn, that we would get so annoyed with each other that we both just start laughing because we knew neither of us was going to win. I miss his jokes, but more than anything, I miss the way that he knew me as only a dad can know their kid, and that when I would search for his eyes across a room, there was this understanding that words can't quite describe. I grieve the things I won't have my dad for, the big and the little, like walking me down the aisle, or helping me fix stupid tech things that I can't figure out without him. But what I know to be true is that I miss him so completely that sometimes I'm just paralyzed with it. Sarah Runnels, a writer, wrote this after the loss of her mother, and I resonate with it so deeply. She wrote, "I know grief is not linear. I know grief is not objective. I know it feels heartless and bizarre to live in this rinse and repeat timeline of people saying sorry for your loss and moving on about their day. I know the world doesn't stop when you lose a great love, but it sure does feel like it should. I know she is always with me. I know I can talk to her and tell her how much I miss her. I know to look for the signs she is there, listening, beaming, still trying to bestow motherly wisdom. But nothing will feel like sitting beside her. Nothing will feel like laughing together. Nothing will feel like it once was. A brutal, inevitable side effect of loving someone so much. And just like Sarah, I love my dad so much. And nothing quite feels the same without him here." But what I also know to be true is that I am Sherman Smoot's daughter, and that is an honor and a privilege that I don't take for granted. Because I'm his, I will live my life bravely, I will pursue my dreams fiercely, I will continue to sing and dance and eat really, really good food for my whole life. And if I can have a fraction of the impact my father had on this planet, I will consider my life well lived. So Dad, I will continue to find you in every sunset, in every good glass of wine and properly cooked steak, and the laughter shared with the people I love, in our favorite songs. And I will always meet you on the dance floor, even though I cannot do the gator. And the only way I know how to end this is the way my dad and I always said goodbye my whole life, from age 0 to 34. He would say it first, and I would echo his response. "Dad, I love you more than all the stars in the universe." Thank you.
Lori told me Sherman would get recognized all the time, anywhere, especially at airports, but not even just here, just all over. They would want to talk to him, say, "Hey, what's up, Sherman?" Share a moment with him. Lori said Sherman would say, "They think I'm somebody more than I really am." No, Sherman, they knew exactly how special you really were.
I just want to say that I see Sherman's face in every one of your faces right here, right now. You've all been such a part of his successes. And I just can't thank you all enough for being here. I know that all of you are here because Sherman gave you a challenge. 2 or 3 days ago, he made the skies open up, the rain came down, people couldn't get here. And I know that today at 12 o'clock, he painted this sky blue so that we could all go out there and we could honor him. Unfortunately, we had about a 35-minute wait. That is typical Sherman control. Right there. He is still controlling me right now. But I want to thank each and every one of you, my family, my friends, all of his squadron that are here tonight, today, family, just everyone. You're all so special to us. And you are my family. Thank you. I would like to let everyone know that food is being served outside. If there's coffee and water around, we're going to be here until 3 o'clock. If anybody would like to come up and speak, please do. Share your favorite Sherman story on the mic with the person next to you. There's a lot of talking to go on until 3 o'clock. Food is being served. Do whatever, just hang out. Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here.
This is my last chance to crew for Sherman this last summer. The mission was to get that young fella right there to fly the Argonaut Sea Fury. You remember at critical mass, okay? Well, the airplane's restored. Sanders restored the airframe. Ken finished up the airplane. Chuck Cave did the wiring. It's a pretty awesome airplane. Ken, if you haven't seen it, they call it no longer critical mass. They call it the Queen, by the way. And it is just spectacular. The airplane is finished in its authentic paint job, great detail. So the mission that weekend was to get TJ Dwelly some time in the airplane, and it was pretty neat. I get to the shop pretty early in the morning, and just tap around on the computer, and in comes Sherman, and it's just dawn break, and Sherman is in search of coffee, and we found coffee, and we found it good. And at some point, we're just chatting. This is really the only time I'd ever spent time on a one-on-one with Sherman. So it was really pretty neat. We walk out in front of the shop, and there's the Sea Fury. It's spectacular. The dawn is broken. It's a beautiful blue sky, and behind it is a 300-year-old oak tree. And it's just a beautiful vision and moment. And we share this view, and we talk a little bit. And after a while, TJ comes up, and they jump in the airplane, strap in, fire up, taxi out, and roar off to their adventure. They flew about 5 sorties the time that I was with them. I just got to run the fuel truck and hang out with the guys. It was a neat deal. I'll call it crewing, okay? But about midway through that day, we've got a gal, Sarah Reese, and at Sanders we've got a Ronca Champ, and Sarah was having a little problems with wheel landings, okay, like many of us have. And Sherman gets wind of this and says, "Oh, this is easy. I can solve this problem." So he jumps in the back of the Champ. Now he's just been in the back of the Sea Fury, 3350 power Sea Fury, big power, and he's jumping in the back of the 85 horsepower Champ. He spends an hour long working with Sarah, and at the end of this thing, she's rolling it on, and she got it. And so he put the airplane away. All that's good. And I think about this, and he went from 3350 power Sea Fury to an 85 horsepower Champ, and he was just happy to be there. Working with folks that wanted to learn. He was very happy to share his knowledge, his experience with folks who are interested in learning. It was a pretty neat deal. I have one more visual I'd like to leave you with. A couple of weeks earlier, I was out at the shop, and I stepped out, coffee cup in hand, and I had that same view of that tree. But there was squawking going on in the tree. And what it was 3 red-tailed hawks, fledgling. And what I saw were those 3 hawks jump out of that tree on their first flight, their maiden flight. And I think it was their first flight because 2 of the hawks flew to the ground, bonk, bounced around a little bit, and they figured it out. They jumped up and flew around. But one of the hawks, when he launched out, just left out and started a little orbit out there. It's hard for me not to think of Sherman as that hawk.
Thank you, Ben. It's my pleasure to introduce a friend of Sherman's for over 40 years. Paul Clark told me that Sherman was more than a friend, but a mentor. Sherman was friends with Paul's father, Judge Bill Clark. Paul, thank you for being here and being willing to share with us today. Paul?
The year was 1984. The year was 1984. I was 20 years old. I'd been working for Sherman for a year, fueling airplanes at the patrol line. And I had just enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, 4-year active duty hitch. And I had to give Sherman my 2 weeks notice. And so Sherman's in his office, and I knock on the door, and I say, "Hey, can I have a second?" And I come in, and I tell him, and he gives me this look, and he says, "What?" And what the hell did you do that for? And so we're talking, and he says, "Well, I got a joke for you." And I remember this joke, even though it was 40 years ago, because I thought it was pretty funny. And it goes like this. at the beginning of the space program, NASA or its predecessor was recruiting their astronauts from the pool of fighter and test pilots from the military branches, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. And as things got going, the Marines weren't getting any of the missions, any of the test flights, anything like that. And NASA started getting some political pushback. And so finally they said, fine, we're going to launch John Glenn into the orbit, but he's going with a monkey. And so they strapped John Glenn in the capsule on the right, the monkey on the left, and they blast off into orbit, and they're going along, and this chime rings, and this piece of paper prints out on the left side, and the monkey grabs it, and he starts reading it, and he starts flipping switches, turning dials, and so on. And John Glenn's looking at him, 15 minutes go by, same thing. Ding, this piece of paper spits out. The monkey grabs it, reads it, same thing. Flipping switches, dials, so on. John Glenn is steamed. And so there you go along, 15 minutes come by, and piece of paper spits out again, and before the monkey can grab it, John Glenn grabs it. Give me that. And he glares at the monkey, and he unravels the piece of paper, and he reads it, and it says, "Feed the Marine." I first met Sherman in 1983. He'd hired me to come fuel airplanes at Patrol Line. Patrol Line was a fixed base operation, a Part 135 charter service, had a commercial aviation mechanic shop, aviation fuel services, a flight school, aircraft rental, and most significantly, the pipeline patrol company. Bob Smoot, Sherman's father, in the 1940s, after getting out of the military, thought of the concept of patrol line, and the idea was that you patrol from the air all the oil pipelines in the ground. The oil companies were a little reluctant, but finally Union Oil hired Bob on a temporary basis, a test basis, and one of the superintendents at Union Oil took a bucket of oil, crude oil. He goes out onto the oil pipeline right-of-way and throws the oil across the pipeline and then goes and hides in the trees. He wants to see if Bob Smoot can find it. So Bob flies over and he radios in and says, "Someone's poured oil over your pipeline and I can see the bucket hidden in the weeds." Roger Roxborough, airport royalty in his own right, told me that story. He grew up here and worked for Patrol Line for many years. Bob grew the company, got multiple contracts, multiple routes, and then in 1952 he was called back into active duties. Things were heating up in Europe over the Cold War, and Bob moved his young family, his wife Shirley, Sherman, and Sherman's sister to Germany, and they were stationed there for 2 years. They came back. Well, let me back up. Before they left, Bob had hired Archie Dean, a student freshly out of Allen Hancock College, who was now a certified plane mechanic. And Archie ran Patrol Line while the Smoots were over in Europe. They came back. As mentioned, Sherman was 6 years old. Unfortunately, Bob Smoot was killed flying pipeline about 25 miles east of here at the mouth of the Bitterwater Valley. Sherman would grow up being mentored by Archie. Archie was spoken of. I never met Archie. He died before I could ever meet him or work at Patrol Line. But everyone I ever spoke to about Archie spoke of him in reverent terms, including Sherman. Sherman looked to him as a father, a mentor, and both Roger Oxborough and Dennis Lyons told me that Sherman would always come back, whether he was in college in Washington, in the Navy, and then when he was flying for Continental, Sherman was always around Patrol Line to fly a charter or when he had free time. So Archie had grown Patrol Line from a basic pipeline company into what it was when I showed up in 1983. In 1982, Archie had died, and Sherman stepped in to run Patrol Line, and that's when I was hired. This airport in 1983 was nothing like it is now. None of these buildings were here. The Duno hangar and all the industrial you see between here and Airport Road was not here. Nuno's were just getting started, had a few hangars up, and on the Airport Road side, it was really mainly farm ground. And Patrol Line was in this house that Sherman had grown up in. It was a hub of activity, full of characters, full of cranky pilots, old crotchety pipeline pilots, and to a 19-year-old who really was interested in flying in aviation. It was heaven. Time goes by, as I mentioned. In 1984, I leave to go into the Marine Corps. In 1988, I came back and finagled my way back into Cal Poly. And at the same time, I was working on all my ratings because I was thinking at the time I wanted to fly for a living. Sherman was still running Patrol Line. It had reverted back to its original mission, which was Pipeline Patrol Company. I got my instrument in commercial ratings. Sherman hired me to fly pipeline while I was going to school. Around the same time, my dad, Bill Clark, who had been in government for a number of years, left government, and at that same time got the aviation bug. And he and Sherman also flew a lot. Sherman checked him out in an AT-6, worked with him. Dad at one point owned a P-40, but we also had the AT-6, a Cessna L-19. So around the same time I was flying pipeline for Sherman, Sherman was checking me out in the AT-6. And Lori, when we spoke, had asked me to describe my flying experience with Sherman. And I can say that Sherman was an incredible flight instructor. Sherman liked to, he could wear the naval aviator F-4 fighter jock swagger. He could put that jacket on with the best of them. But when it came to instruction, he was all business. And I'll never forget this because we're about to start flying. Sherman, a week before, said, you need to memorize the manual. I did. He brings me into his office where he's quizzing me on it. And then he picks up this old wooden toy airplane. I mean, something you would have given a 4-year-old when you still gave wood toys to children instead of plastic. And I'm antsy. I want to go fly. But Sherman starts talking about you know, the different axes of an airplane, the vertical axis, the horizontal axis, the yaw axis. And he starts describing the different effect as you're going through aerobatics, and the different effects that having aerobatics, or being in different conditions, and what you have to do with the inputs, with the controls to execute the aerobatics early. And so this wasn't just take it around the patch, you can land it, you're good to go. Sherman was a taskmaster. And now, I was a tail dragger pilot. I flew pipeline. I had time in Super Cubs, Citabras, L-19s, and I considered myself a competent tail dragger pilot. And T6s are not L-19s, they're not Super Cubs. They're a handful. And Sherman took me through all the stalls, the spins, the recovery, and the military nicknamed the AT-6 is the pilot maker. And I got a quick dose on how and why. And Sherman's method of instruction, he was not this hard ass, this, this is how you do it, and don't. He would explain to you how you do it. You would do it, or try to do it. Sherman would ask you what you did wrong, and then have you do it again, and again, and again, until you got it right. But he was never, I'm taking the controls, he was an excellent, patient flight instructor. So, time goes on. I'm married to Gigi. We have 4 kids, and I'm in law school. I divert from flying, and Sherman, at around this point, retires out of the Continental Airlines. He and John Moore and Marcia Moore are starting the idea they want a race team. John bought my father's AT-6. Picture's right here. John has a good knack for names for racers. They called it Bad Company. And that was Sherman's first foray into air racing. Around the same time, my father partnered with Tiger DeStefani and David Price on building a P-47 that had come out of Yugoslavia. It was a major undertaking because it wasn't so much a P-47D as it was a carcass of a P-47D. It was in very bad shape, no engine cowling. Bill DeStefani in his shop did the restoration. We had to have an engine cowling built for that out of scratch from a shop in Duxford, England. When the time came and the plane was ready to fly, Bill made sure that the Clarks had an opportunity to fly it. Now, my dad and I were decent pilots. We flew tail draggers, we flew T6s. And we kind of looked at each other and decided, there are only 8 of these flying in the world. This is probably close to being priceless. Yeah. So when Bill asked us who's going to fly it, we sent over Sherman Smoot. And Sherman then, along with his air racing with John and Marcia, broke into the Warbird world, the air race world, and it was, as they say, the rest is history. As I mentioned, Sherman's and my paths diverged, but we oftentimes cross paths. And I got to say that after Continental, and he's starting Bella Luna, and he's working with John Moore, and getting into air racing, Sherman had changed. Sherman seemed more settled, more content, happy. he always was a bundle of energy. He was always kind of this, spark plug ready to fire. But he just seemed to really come into a good place in life. And I'd like to think, or maybe it was, the winery, maybe it was the Warbirds and the air racing. But Lori, it was, I think, more than anything, it was you. And he just seemed content. He seemed like he was in his right place in life. And Sherman, may God bless you, keep you in the palm of your hand, and may perpetual light shine upon you.
Thank you, Paul, for sharing. Next, I'm happy to introduce Tom Madden, dear friend of Sherm, also heads the Pioneer Museum, does remarkable work for this community. Flew with Sherm across the English Channel on the 75th anniversary of D-Day and a lot more. Tom, I know you have Sherm meant a lot to you, and thank you for coming up and sharing with us.
Present. So Dennis Noble, all you guys in the aviation community know Dennis. So Dennis and I, our grandfathers were brothers, so we're, I don't know, second cousins, 3/4 detached and a couple removed or something. Anyway, Dennis has a short presentation.
Lori, I got this flag from our U.S. Congressman Mike Garcia, who is also a naval aviator, and he flew it over the Capitol. I got a certificate for you with it, and God bless Sherman, and I know we all loved him. We're all going to miss him, and I hope we all think about him for a long time. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Dennis. So there's a segue here. We heard from Sherm's daughter about the C-47 and Paul. And I was, I moved back to the county in the early 90s. And Paul's older brother Colin and I were good friends. And Colin says, hey, you got to come to the airport on Sunday. The C-47's here. And Sherman's going to fly it down to the Santa Monica Air Museum. So we came out here, got here before Sherm, walked around the plane, beautiful airplane. And then Sherman shows up, and Colin introduces me to Sherman. And I'd never met him before, but every one of you guys here, hey, Tom, it's good to meet you. You know, he was just that guy, and when he shook your hand and looked in your eyes, you were the only thing that mattered right there. I mean, he was just that guy. And as I look around today, I bet there's 100 guys in this room that would consider Sherman to be, if not your best friend, one of your best friends, because that was Sherman Smoot. I mean, Sherman made everybody feel absolutely special. And when he had your attention, you're all that mattered to him. And he was a really, really remarkable person, obviously the life of the party, more fun than people should be allowed to have. And I'm very lucky. Lori asked me to talk a little bit about some experiences that aren't airport related. So as Adam said, I'm involved with Pioneer Day, and we started an antique tractor show down at Santa Margarita Ranch in 2015. And I approached Sherman and Scott and Randy Wilbur and said, hey, can we have a component here? We're going to honor all of the fallen every day at noon on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this tractor show. And a lot of veterans came, a lot of veterans had never been thanked before, and Sherman says, hey, we're going to make this special. We're going to bring the planes down, and we're going to do a flyby at the end of that ceremony every day, and we're going to make all the veterans there feel special, and we're going to honor all those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. So, you know, we're getting ready for the show. In comes the C-47, in comes the T-28, in comes the T-34, and these guys, together with Executive Suite, the B-25, every day flew for the show and did nice low flyovers. If you guys know Sherman, gotta be low. And then Randy, of course, gotta be lower. And then Scott, I gotta beat those guys. So anyway, we had a lot of fun there. And then when the props quit turning every day, that's when the mischievous Sherman came out. So we all had a few sodas, and Sherman goes, I want to drive that tractor, I want to drive the half track, and I want to drive that tank. So one of my friends had a couple of military tanks, and in goes Sherman, and Sherman goes roaring off. Later in the day, we're all kind of assembled together, having a good time, and here comes the tank, and who's up on the turret but Sherman, with the 50 cal in his hands, and he comes up, and they slide up to us, and he just blasts us all, da 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 da, and it's like, you're all dead. So Sherman, he didn't have to be in an airplane to have fun. That guy was the life of the party, obviously. So fast forward, the show's over on the first year, and Travis Hansen had gotten a brand new Caterpillar Challenger tractor, $500,000 tractor, brand new John Deere belted tractor, another $500,000 tractor. And all of a sudden, it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night on Sunday night, the show's over, and they're taking the tractors down to the landing strip at the Santa Margarita Ranch. And they're gonna see which is faster, the Caterpillar or the John Deere. So of course, Sherman and Randy, partners in crime, climb in the John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer, right? And Travis is like, hey, you guys aren't certified, you're not supposed to be doing this. He climbs in the Caterpillar, they go down there. It's just like a drag race. Go! And they're off. And I clocked him at 30 miles an hour in my Kubota. And then my phone rings. It's Rob Rossi, who owns the ranch. What the hell are there lights on my runway at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night? So I go back. Sherman, you just got my ass chewed. He goes, yeah, but we won. So that was Sherman. The next story is something that I'm gonna take to my grave with me, because Scott and Sherman and Gary Carippo all came to me and they explained what was going to happen with DAX over Normandy, and that was all the C-47s and DC-3s from around the world were going to congregate in Duxford, England, prior to D-Day, and then they were all going to fly across the channel, drop paratroopers, and celebrate the 75th anniversary of Operation Overlord, the greatest amphibious landing in the history of the world. And so they said, can you help us raise the money? And I said, yeah, I'll help you out. So, Carippo calls George Hurst, gets some money. I lean on a couple of my friends. I know one of them is here today. And we raised like $350,000 to put a new right engine, new nav, comms on Betsy. At the time, the wings were still off. So Betsy's out here with no wings. There was oxidation. Scott spearheaded the crew. They got Betsy back together. We raised the money. They got the engine installed. Now it's time to go off to England. So they weren't there at the tractor show that year. But Sherman had taken me aside and says, hey, if you get this done for me, for us, so we can go celebrate all these veterans and all these people from 75 years ago, there's going to be a seat for you on Betsy crossing the English Channel on D-Day. So my background, history major, military history. My dad was a World War II veteran. An uncle flew Corsairs in the South Pacific. Another uncle was a PDY navigator. So this was like a dream come true for me. So fast forward, Scott puts the team together and worked with all the other DACs, get across America, do all the flybys up and down the Hudson, Washington, D.C., all that stuff. Fly up Nova Scotia, Greenland, Iceland, Scotland, Duxford, and then they're staging there and doing a lot of stuff. And I get to fly over. We had to put on a tractor show, then I had to put on a beer festival. Then the day after the beer festival, flew to England and met up with these guys. And I know, Scott, it didn't go perfectly. I seem to recall you guys had to steal like barrels of oil because they hadn't given you guys what they promised. They'd only put enough fuel in the airplane for the sorties that day. And Sherman at that point was kind of pissed off and tired, and we heard somebody talk about, Sherman wanted to fly back, first class across the channel, but he couldn't do that. So the morning we're leaving the hotel, early in the morning on the 5th of June, we're driving to the airport, and me being the wise-ass attorney I am, I turn my phone on and I go, Sherman, hey, it's the big day, what do you think? And he just looks right at me and just says, "Hey, Madden, F off." So it's like, okay, this is going to be an interesting day. So we all get out to the airport. All the gear for the guys, they're going to stay on the continent after the 5th and 6th. Everything goes on the airplane, reporters, camera people, and it's mobbed. It's loaded down. All these planes take off, and the visual of the formation flying across the English countryside with all these World War II airplanes is just unbelievable. And everybody's got their heads glued to the windows, and they're looking out, and they're looking at the other airplanes that you feel like you can reach out and touch. So we go past London, and I hear this, "Matt, get up here." So the co-pilot comes back and says, "Sherman wants you up in the cockpit." So after we passed London, I'm in the right seat of the C-47 with Sherman across the English Channel. The C-47s are in a loose formation until they get close to the mainland. But I got to tell you, for a kid who loves our veterans, loves the U.S. military and the history of it, I mean, this is truly, we all talk about once-in-a-lifetime experiences. This was just as good as it gets. And it was Sherman took me aside and says, "You'll have a seat on that airplane." And never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be in the right seat, flying across the English Channel, just like those 19, 20, 21-year-old boys did 75 years earlier. And I had never been to France before, so my first glimpse of France was on D-Day from the right seat of a C-47 sitting next to Sherman Smoot. Okay, that's what kind of a man Sherman Smoot was. Anyway, the life of the party, tremendous individual. Sherman, here's to you until we meet again.
Thank you, Tom. Finally, Bob Button is here, owner of the Voodoo, a famous modified P-51 Mustang, also a friend of Sherman for a long time, and one who shared this deep love with the sport of air racing. And if anyone could relate to how this sport flowed through all of Sherman's veins, Bob can, because it's in him as well. Bob.
Hello everyone. For those of you I have not met yet, my name is Bob Button. My darling wife and I campaigned in a P-51 Mustang from 1995 to 2017. And my mentor, Bill DeStefani, went down to the auction with me, and we bought it. And after every race, the whole plan was what we were going to do for next year, because the whole thing was to modify the airplane. And between 96 and 97, we did a lot of major work to it. And Bob Hanna flew it from 95 to 99, and in 97, L.D. Hughes was the crew chief for us that year. And we qualified the airplane back when there was enough airplanes. You had to qualify because there's more planes than spots. And Bob had an emergency and he had to leave, and it's Thursday. And we shook hands and I said, okay, good. I was happy that we made the event after all the work we did to the airplane. And we qualified, and I was good. In a few hours, people come by and ask me if they were looking for a pilot. And I usually got plan A, plan B, and a backup plan. I had no plan for this, and I said no. So my mentor, Tiger, he comes idling in the pit, and he goes, hey, I heard your boy left. Yes. And he goes, you looking for a driver? And I says, that's the rumor. So he says, I got a guy that can do it, and at least shot a meeting. So 30 minutes later, here comes Tiger, and this round-headed, kind of chunky guy with a smile from ear to ear. And as everybody said, once you shake his hand, he's the real deal. And I knew that he and I were going to get along fabulously. So we sat down and talked, and I said, you haven't flown this thing, and I don't want to breech load you. So you really want to do this? Oh yeah, no problem. Like he graduated at the top of his Naval Academy, and he flew this and flew that. And he was ready to go. So we went and got him in the airplane on Thursday, and Tiger came up and explained a little bit, or most of what goes on, and we got clearance, and he flew it. So I figured, well, if he can take off and he can land, that's a great first step. So off he goes, beautiful takeoff, beautiful landing. And he comes in and we get up on there to debrief him. And Mustang people always unload the hydraulics. And I'm standing next to the fuselage, so I stick my hand down and I unload the hydraulics. So you slide off the flap when it's down. So we go in, we debrief again, we prep the airplane that night for tomorrow's first race, and we get him in the airplane, we fire it up, and he taxis off, and the flaps are down. So talking to LD as we're walking back, we get up on the trailer, and I said, hey, why don't you call him and tell him the flaps are down? He goes, no, he's got it. And so he does the run-up with the flaps down, and then he starts to roll down the runway with the flaps down. And LD says, hey, your flaps. So he pulls the flaps up, and off he goes, joined up beautifully, came down the chute, made it about a half a lap, and made 8 out. And what had happened, we thought, and we didn't put much emphasis on this, we didn't get the ADI pump on, so we had a heat problem in the pistons. Anyway, the game was over, it's all good. So we get done with that little bit of drama. So we're standing there. I said, hey, what was the thing with the flaps? And he goes, well, who put the flaps down? I said, I did. And he goes, I'm trained, if you don't touch it, you never touch it. So what he was telling me, that since he didn't put the flaps down, he didn't know to bring them up. And it's just the way he was trained, and he was just that guy. So over a decade and a half, we pitted next to him. We had John Moore and the song I Ain't Got No Job, and the wine started showing up. And once we parked him and started working on him at night, that's what really the part that I enjoyed. I love the competition, but I love that part of the people part. And so we went through this time, and then Art Vance was our leader. We lost him. Sherman ended up being the president of the Unlimited Group. And in 2016, Shannon called and asked me if I'd like to be vice president. And I've been riding everybody's coattail for 20 years. I said I'd be more than happy to. So I called Sherman and I said, hey, I'm your guy. What do we need? He goes, I'll just see you on the ramp. So 2016, I go and ask him, what can I do? And he goes, okay, here's these 3 people that haven't paid their dues yet. Go collect the money. I said, well, hey, vice president, we can collect money, I guess. So come back with 3 checks. I said, now what? He goes, no, we're good. Everything's smooth. And really all the pilots were all professional. There was no Karens or whatever you would call them. Everybody worked together, and off we went. And so I remember what we do on Sunday is we know how many airplanes are going to race, and then you break out the prize money. And Sherman did the calculations, and you take it to Rah-Rah, and at the banquet they got your check for you. Well, he comes back in about 30 minutes, and he looks a little bit, it's hard to tell when he's mad, but he just, something wasn't right. And I go, what happened? He goes, oh, they changed the prize money. So, which was fine. He got that done, we took it back, and in 2017, in 16 I didn't go to the president's meeting, which is in the winter. So in 17 I went to the president's meeting, and we discussed, basically you're negotiating with Rah-Rah how many planes you can get, what's the purse, and without much purse we can't get much planes, and again a negotiation thing. So we wrote down all the scenarios, and when I got home I wrote out an agreement, and I sent it to Sherman, and I go, what do you think? And he goes, number one, they're not going to sign it, and it's been 54 years, they've never signed an agreement. It's their sandbox, and they do what they want. So I said, let me see. Mike Corral was the chairman at the time, and president or whatever he was. And I got along fine with him. So I called him up, told him what I had on mine, and drove up and had lunch with him. And he read it, and he goes, yeah, that'll probably work. So he puts the contract down, and there was 2 of them, so we both had a signed copy. Before the entree comes, we're talking. So I pull out a pen and I says, can you sign that before lunch gets here? So we had a signed agreement. And so we're in like Flint now. So Sunday comes, before we even broke the money down, one of Mike's underlings comes and says, hey, Mike wants to talk to you. So Sherman, he goes, "Want to ride?" And I said, "No, we'll walk." And I told Sherman, "It's about the money." He goes, "No, man, well, it was about the money." So we go in, and Sherman is being the diplomat that Sherman is. Bob Button, not so much. I lasted about 10 minutes, and I said, "With all due respect, gentlemen, I'm done with this meeting. I have an agreement. Let's man up." And I leave, and about 15 minutes later, Sherman comes, and I look at him, and he said he'd be here like in 20, 30 minutes. So Mike came and sat down at our plastic tables and our plastic chairs in our pit, and we worked it out, and between Sherman's delicate nature and mine not so much delicate nature, we did get our money, and so everybody got paid. After 2010, the prize money kept going down, and it's just expensive to run these things. And if you can almost think you're going to break even if you win, that was enough to motivate us to go. And I just had a wonderful time, and again, the big smile. Everybody that knows him said what needs to be said, and God love you, Sherm. And I called him, with all respect, Sherwood Smooth, because he was just a smooth guy, nicest guy. But anyway, appreciate you all coming tonight, and love you, Sherman, like everybody here, and rock on, brother.